Tom. I was Joe's favorite son-in-law. And as Sarah indicated, I had the good fortune to be living with Jojo for about 25 years, since 1996. And I can tell you it was a lot more eventful than I thought it was going to be. Now, I had known Jojo for quite some time before she moved in with us, and I knew Jojo to be a person of tremendous energy and youthful exuberance. But my oh my, I just did not understand that exuberance was something that occurred each and every day and each and every living moment. Frankly, it was just absolutely irrepressible. And just, it was something that, well, hard to put into words, frankly. Now, I will say that, and will admit that at times it can be difficult, perhaps, living with someone who is a veritable force of nature. But I can tell you, goddamn, it was memorable. So one of the real benefits for me of having Jojo living with us was getting the opportunity to listen to Joe and Maeve talk about things that had occurred in their lives before I met them. And sometimes we would just sit for hours at a time, or reminiscing about some of these events. And I can tell you one thing, it was something that I found extremely satisfying, and always there would be something interesting that came up. And certainly all of the stories were ones that really, for me, just made me feel good. I think of when Jojo would make and sell soup at their swim meets, or their summer vacations at Christina Lake, or their family ski vacation at Schweitzer with the Cadillac family, or when Joe and her good pals Erlene Cromarty and Mark Lightfoot would go on their annual road trips to Reno. I think the demise of Reno as a destination spot, that demise coincided with when Joe and her pals stopped going there, Now, another thing that I realized about Joe, and I'm sure a lot of you have noticed this when hanging out with Joe, but Joe, when she came into a room or any place, she's one of those rare people that could really command the room and engage everyone in the room, but while doing so, really made you feel good. Like I say, a rare talent, but that's one of the things I really think about Joe and will always remember. So for example, I've had lots of parties with Joe. Joe liked to have a good time, you all know. And so I remember so many times where Joe would grab her shillelagh and jump up on a chair or a table and start singing songs like, The Woman is Smarter, or some of you must remember her doing the Mickey Mouseies up and down her spine, so never forget that. Or she loved to sing, When Irish Eyes Are Smiling, like she did at Stephen Carey's wedding. And the thing that's most memorable about that is that she got everyone in that wedding reception up and singing along with her to that. It was just phenomenal, but it was just, as I say, that energy, that presence she had to get everyone, feeling really good in the moment. Another great time was we were hanging out in our backyard and we got a phone call, and it was for Joe, and it was Harry Belafonte phoning her from Ireland, where he was touring with her brother-in-law, Paddy O'Toole. And so Jojo spoke to this, mega star icon, Harry Belafonte, spoke with him for at least 5 minutes. And the thing that I remember most about that wasn't the fact that, this icon phoned her. It was that she kept this man enthralled on the phone for that 5+ minutes, and really, he succumbed to Joe's charms, and eating out of her hand, so to speak. It was just incredible. And then when she hung up, she just turned back to us and started carrying on with the previous conversation we were having, like nothing happened. It was just so much fun. I also think of the time where she would tell the story about when she met Willie Nelson in Trail when he was touring. And she was eating hot dogs with him, bullshitting with him, and she offered to Willie that she would put on a bake sale to raise funds so he could pay off his IRS debts. Classic JoJo. As Sarah said, JoJo had a great love for her home in Ireland and would go back there many times. One of the places she talked about a lot was a vacation spot on the west coast called Kilkee. And JoJo loved talking about Kilkee and how she would go there when she was younger, and then every time she went back she would try and go there. And she talked about swimming in the bay and swimming in the pollock holes and eating periwinkles. And several years ago, we all got to go to Ireland with JoJo for her last visit there. And we all went out to Kilkee, and we agreed with JoJo. It's just a beautiful spot. I know Emily wanted to move there, and Steve still wants to move there and play golf every day at the Kilkee Golf Course. But it truly is a nice place, and we got to experience swimming there and the pollock holes, which really are really cool. But dear JoJo, none of us like them periwinkles. Another thing about Joe that I really admired, and Sarah touched on it, but I really admired the relationship that she had with her nieces and nephews back home. Again, those relationships were cultivated in the handful of times she got to go back to Ireland, or the odd time when some of them came here. But the thing that I really noticed when I was there the couple of times with her and she was interacting with her nieces and nephews is just the quality of the relationship that she had with them, and just how rich and deep that was, and how much she truly cared for and loved her nieces and nephews. And I know that they absolutely loved their dear Auntie Jo. Another thing I'd like to mention is when Maeve and I were with Jo in Ireland back in 1987, and the three of us, her sister Carol O'Toole took the three of us to Bunratty Castle, and they're having there's like a big big feast that was put on there. Yes, thank you. There's a few hundred people there, and so most of them were French tourists actually, but Carol had arranged it so that presiding over this big huge feast, Maeve and I were crowned king and queen. So we thought, this was fantastic. We're actually following in the footsteps of Malcolm and Jo, who had done that about 10 years prior to that. Now, when we got named king and queen, we had some responsibilities that we had to take care of. But before we could even get into that, Jo, of course, took it upon herself to anoint herself as the Queen Mother and tried to, I guess, usurp my authority. And so a couple of things I remember from that. Jo, in her role as Queen Mother, thought it was very appropriate to start a sing-along. Of course, as I say, there's a couple hundred French people in there. Most of them didn't speak any English. So Jo started up a chorus of Frere Jacques and had all these French guys singing. So after a while, as I say, Joe taking over the show, and as perhaps a somewhat young, petulant king, I made the determinations to actually send Jojo to the dungeon. I will say it was probably the one time where I've had the upper hand in a relationship. And I will say, as much as I enjoyed that moment, frankly, I think Jojo enjoyed it more than I did. One of the things I came to learn about Jo was that she was able to see the positive in everything and everyone in every situation. And so I think of one of the stories Maeve told me, and Jo told me as well, but their next door neighbor in Glen Mary, Mr. Vito Esposito, had a great vegetable garden, was very proud of his garden and his beautiful tomatoes. And so every spring, before planting, Mr. Esposito would get a big, huge load of manure delivered, with the inevitable consequences for the entire Glen Mary. And Maeve, whose bedroom was apparently right beside the vegetable garden, was especially aggrieved by the resulting smell that was there all the time, and would I guess raise this with her mom. And Jo, in her way, responded simply by saying, but Maeve, just wait till we get those glorious tomatoes this summer. To this day, Maeve hates tomatoes. Jo was also a bit of a rebel, probably no surprise to most of you. And Jo loved all of her neighbors in Glen Mary, and I think the neighbors all loved her. And Jo was especially fond of the kids, so friends of John and Maeve and Steve's. And her door was always open to all the kids in Glen Mary. And frankly, I think Jo really loved that. As charming John and Maeve and Steve as you are, I think the real pull was Jojo. And so John, who he himself loved to party as well, I think, but quite often late at night he would bring the parties home to their house, into their basement. And as the parties would wear on in the evening, of course, Maeve would be trying to shut down the party and would be grabbing guys and bringing them up the stairs and shooing them out the front door and sending them on their way. Meanwhile, Jojo was sneaking in the driveway, grabbing the guys and pulling them back into the basement through the basement door. And so the party never seemed to end. Jo, frankly, as I said, it was a pleasure having you in our house for as long as you were there. And your antics were unforgettable, and we will never forget you, Jo. I think I'll leave with a quote from another entertaining person, Bob Hope. Jo, thanks for the memories.